teams tend to be seeded. So it's really important to put the effort into your first few rounds so that you get the nicest draw possible in your latter rounds. And so I would really advise that people do that. One of the ways I used to do that was I'd always pick the round furthest away. No one likes to travel, so if I thought my first year doing the Mace, I wasn't very good. I didn't come anywhere near breaking in any of the tournaments I did that year. So what I did for my first round of Mace is I picked one in Dundalk. 2 teams showed up. I came second, as I told everyone. No need to tell them only 2 teams showed up. I went through to the next round. Great, excellent. And it does give you that kind of confidence, in my third year I made the final in the Mace. I was still pretty awful at regular VP, but I worked really hard, and so I got to beat people like Derek Lance and stuff. And I mean, the look on their faces when you beat them, it's brilliant. So it's really worth the work. Just to let you know, do put in that work, and you will get further. It's also I'm pimping the Mace a bit here now, but it is a great competition. The final is always amazing. There's always plenty of booze with the Mace. Everyone's invited. It's a big communal piss up, but it's really nice to be in the final and have all your friends watching. So what I'm going to talk about now is basically the positions that you have. So in the first round, everyone says you don't know your position until you turn, right? In the latter rounds, you're given your positions, but in the first round, you don't know your position. And what everyone always does is they go and they prep some prop arguments and some mock arguments, and they're actually like, I'm sorted now, no matter what one I draw. What I would say is, yes, you don't know your positions, but there's a big difference between if you draw first prop and you draw second prop. So if you prepare that you are capable of giving that first prop speech, have thought through your model, have thought through your mechanism, maybe even have practiced a first prop speech out loud, because it's one that's entirely within your control if you draw it, right? It's not contingent on what anyone else has to say in the round, it's something you kind of completely prepped. And similarly with the first op speech, I would always have prepared them for the first round. And oftentimes I think people for the first round as well say, I should write 4 arguments on prop, 4 arguments on op, and a ground. Not so much. If there's a good team in the first prop ahead of you, they're going to cover those 4 basic arguments. So you need to put the time in to get the more advanced arguments for the second half. So just for the first round, make sure you prep both first prop and first op. And then in terms of latter rounds and stuff, you will get your position in advance, okay? There's a massive difference between a prepared debate and an IB, obviously. In an IB, you have 15 minutes, you come up with whatever you have. In a prepared debate, there's a lot more tactics involved in your preparation. But which I mean, if you were in first prop in a prepared debate, you need to, one, identify what this debate is about. The biggest thing I would say, the biggest trick I would always say to you is ask yourself what needs to be true to win, right? Because if you can cover in first prop what needs to be true to win, it doesn't matter if second prop have lots of nice arguments or lots of new and interesting ideas and things like that. You have crucially covered what needs to be true in this debate to win. Ergo, you have to win. Or at the very least, you get a bad judge, which you won't have in the Mace. But in other countries, if you were to get a bad judge, the worst thing you would get out in that scenario is second, if they're particularly enamored with an interesting idea. So ask yourself what needs to be true to win. The other thing I'd say in first prop is, Mace debates are often quite broad, right? They're often a general principled idea and stuff like that. Generally, though, there's something behind them, right? If you get a debate, a broad debate about sovereignty, it isn't just a broad debate about sovereignty. It's generally motivated by something that's happened in the news lately, right? So you need to know about that. You need to have read up and worked out what it is the debate is about. Because if you don't cover that from first prop and second prop cover it, the debate has moved past you and you're not in the game. In fact, you just sound like you missed what was going on, okay? So if it is a broad debate, if it is a broad topic, do try and find out what exactly it's about. The final thing I'd say in first prop is the Mace, yes, isn't the same as the Irish Times. It isn't there's much more focus put on, say, argumentation and style in that. That said, it's not an excuse not to be stylistic, right? People think, oh, well, it's the Mace, it's not about style. But if you've drawn first prop and you haven't practiced your first prop first speech before the round, if you haven't timed it, and when you're timing it, by the way, you want to be leaving about 6:20, you want to be coming in about 6:20 6:30, so you have time for the POIs you'll be taking. But if you haven't done those things, those things do impact on how persuasive you are in the round. And it's often marginal calls in Mace rounds. Bear in mind, everyone has done, everyone is prepared, everyone has the topic, everyone's had some time to think about it. So style does start to impact more in these kind of prepared debates than it does in another debate. It's reasonable to say that if someone has 15 minutes to prepare a speech, and someone has 2 weeks to prepare a speech, you would expect a much higher standard, a much higher level of argumentation, a much higher level of fluency from the person who's had two weeks to prepare. So just because it's the Mace and it's not the public speaking competition doesn't mean be a bad public speaker. It's not. And I'm not saying you have to put all your work into language and stuff like that. But if it's the first time you're saying that speech out loud, you're going to be less persuasive. You're going to be more nervous about it, and you're not going to have that fluency. Particularly in the latter rounds, you want one half of the battle is having judges really consider you when they go in. When these rounds are tight, you want to make it sound like you are confident, you think you should be there, you think you should be going through. Because judges, and it's something that people don't say often enough, but judges are scared all the time. They're terrified of getting the wrong call. They take their cues from the teams as much as anything else. If you are the team who looks nervous, who looks like they're losing, who looks like they don't think they're in it, it is an easy call for the judge to knock you out. And it's not a conscious thing. It's not that judges are mean and choose to screw over certain teams or stuff like that. It's that judges are just terrified of going down the pub afterwards and having a team say, I thought I went through, and everyone thought, and we discussed it after the round, and we all thought we'd gone through, and that's an awful decision. So if you act like you're confident and stuff like that, judges will really think twice before knocking you out. Now, I'm not saying being confident is the only thing, obviously, but it's a massive help in terms of getting you in that discussion and getting you to the final and to hopefully win. So that's first prop. Anyone got any questions on first prop? Oh, come on.
Can you give an example of the things which need to be true for you to win? As in, you need to have a relative and fact-based argumentation? Or?
Yeah, okay, so in first prop, everyone always tells you need to have a problem. You need to identify the problem, and you do need to do the problem, right? But people often forget when you're doing the problem, your problem is your problem and solution are almost one and the same, right? So if my problem, for example, I want to have mandatory minimum sentencing or something like that. And I said, well, the problem at the minute is you've judges giving out different types of sentencing to different people. You've, I think for the deterrence effect is massively reduced because the headline cases of people getting 3 months for dealing loads of cocaine, and I have a couple of other problems, right? I then, you propose your solution. Your solution is mandatory minimums. Then what you need to do is say why the solution is the best solution, right? But the fourth point, which is the benefits of your solution, is essentially your first point reversed. By which I mean, my fourth point is then, and now justice will be fair and equal, and everyone will get the same sentence. And now justice will have a far greater deterrent effect because no one's going to be getting 3 months and it's going to be, you know what I mean? So when you're in first prop, when you're giving the Prime Minister's speech, it is, first of all, first prop is the easiest position to win from, right? First of all, in general, in IBs and stuff, people are terrified, but it is everything within your control. But in a prepared debate, first prop is the ideal position, right? So if you're not winning from first prop, you just haven't done your homework. So you want to be but it is a very simple structure. Once you've set up the problem, once you've given your solution, then say why your solution is the best solution. And then your benefits of your solution are essentially the problem is fixed. So you just invert the first point. And particularly where it's very important to say why your solution is the best solution is if you're defending something very hardline. Right? The more hardline, the more you need to rule out why all other alternatives aren't possible. Because if you don't do that, it becomes really easy for a first option to give you a negative case where they're but isn't there, what about this? Isn't this easier to do? Isn't that easier to do?
Do line points start saying a VP, which was
yeah. In the Mace, you can go tag your points. And as well, it is one of those things, and I know it's a very minor thing, but in prepared competitions and stuff, you'd also put a bit of effort into your points sounding the best way they can, right? So do put a little bit of time into naming your points so that they carry as much weight as possible. Yeah, I think that's a great trick for IBs in general, but the reason why it's great is if you happen to start running out of time saying your third point, but your labeling explains the point well enough for you, judges are more forgiving and kind of fill in the blanks more for you than if you haven't done that. It's why as well, like giving your points up top, there should be no issues with timing if you, particularly in the first speech, if you've prepared it, like practiced it beforehand. But I think it's always best to give the judges what you're going to say, because it allows them to kind of follow where you're going. Judges, again, you know, it's a subconscious ego thing, but they like to think they're on board, they're smart enough to follow this. And if you're trying to do the big ta-da moment at the end where you like collect all your points, your judge isn't following along with you. So they'll feel stupid for a bit, and then be like, or you have a judge who'll be like thinking you're going somewhere you're not going, and might even be disappointed with the point you give in the end because they were expecting it to go somewhere else. So yeah, I would give my points.
If you're a first speaker, like gives a speech, and then the first speaker in opposition comes up and like completely takes your argument apart, how does the second speaker then like re-manipulate it without like abandoning everything you said?
That is tricky. It's unfortunate when that happens. No, first of all, that shouldn't happen in the maze if you've done your homework, right? And your homework should really involve what is the other side going to say, right? Usually when you're in the first speaker, you get to do what, like you should be doing a lot of what I like to call pre-bubble, but like whatever way you want to call it, you can put like fixes in your model and stuff like that essentially just knock out lines of argumentation from the other side. But you'd be surprised the amount of people who don't do this. Like, I mean, there was a Mace panel, I think 3 or 4 years ago, it was on banning public sector workers from striking. And first prof stood up and they had the usual case laid out, and first off stood up and they said, yeah, like that's all well and good, we're not going to argue your principles, but the fact is you're going to have wildcat strikes. You're going to have workers just refusing to work, or just, ad hoc strikes all the time if you do this. And the first prof team hadn't considered that might happen. They just thought if they proved that it would be really bad if public sector workers went on strike, they didn't envisage for 1 second that like they might do it anyway. So it is just, you really have to ask yourself what is the other side going to say. And it can often be hard when you're in a mentality of like you've spent a week reading for one particular side of the debate. Like, but in later rounds, ask your friends, what would you say or not? You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to ask for a bit of advice, particularly younger teens. Like there's plenty of people around the society who will help you with making your mind around, and ask them for that help. Because the additional benefit of the Mace is you essentially get cases for your case file, and like I don't just mean you get the 4 debates you do in the Mace, or the 5 debates if you win the 4 debates, 5 debates if you win the international Mace, is it?
It could be more.
Oh yeah, because all the people did the Mace this year, yeah. But it's not just them, it's that you'll have done quite a range of debates, and so you'll have got ideas. And so it's a great one to do with your IB partner as well, because you'll have gotten used to talking to them about ideas, and you'll have, well, essentially you're forced to prep together for a few hours, which may or may not have happened anyway. So, any other questions on first one?
Nothing mentioned that like pre-vote election should be prepared enough within your points, or just like within your policy?
Within your policy, you should do a bit of it. Within your points, like within your points, yeah. It's why I always say ask what the best solution is. That's the one where generally first off will run a soft, what I call a soft case on you, and will like just essentially argue a more moderate version of your policy, which is death. When first off do that, debates die, but often the first off win. So in first prop, please don't let them do it for your own sake, and also for the judge's sake, because then it's a debate by 20 minute quibbles, and it's really hard to win from prop then, because you're like, okay, well, I'm advocating a marginal benefit, and they're like, yeah, but we're advocating another slightly better marginal, you know what I mean? So do put in things there. In terms of first op then, what I would always do in first op is have that, like, people say you can't really prepare for first op, right? Because they say that first op is largely a practical speech, particularly compared to you're bashing the model. You're not getting a lot of practical case and stuff. You can prepare for it. Like, it is reasonable to expect what the model is. Like, you can ask yourself, well, what would I do tonight in the first prop? Like, and go through those kind of models and just have a bit of an idea. Like, it's like, they're not going to come up with something insane. They're not going to squirrel, you hope. If they do, we'll talk about that in a minute. But so you can have reasonably prepared and stuff like that. However, unlike IVs and stuff, like in IVs, you know, people have 15 minutes in first prop to come up with their case, come up with their model, and everything like that. When someone's had 2 weeks, it's less likely that you're going to have 7 minutes of rebuttal material on their model because they've had 2 weeks to do it. You would hope it's a slightly better model than if they'd been given, you know, 15 minutes. So in first op, in prepared debates, I would put more of my case in the first speech. By which I mean, in IVs, what I would always say to someone is, put all your practical arguments in the first speech and first op, hold all your principles in the main guts of your case for the second speaker, screw the first prop, put them in a situation where they haven't had a chance to respond to the main guts of your case, and force the situation so that second prop have to engage with you and you go back, you know, you have a material that travels into the second half, right? And by which I mean that you would essentially use the second speech from first op as an extension speech almost. That doesn't work as well in a prepared competition because it's very unlikely that you're going to have the full 7 minutes on model bashing and stuff like that. What you will be able to do is give at least 3.5 to 4 minutes on practical arguments when you're in first op, right? And you will have thought through the practical ramifications of this. Like when I say practical arguments, like they can be the main arguments knocking your problem stuff, but I would group my practical arguments in the first speech. Then I would have maybe 1 point of principled argument, and I would keep the guts again for the second half. The reason for that, the second speech, the reason for that is you just want to make sure that second prop are talking about you. You want to make sure that when a judge leaves the room, that first op is very much in the whole debate. And first op is the best position to be in because you essentially get the second speech in first op is a sort of a hinge speech. It is the gateway into the second half of the debate, so you can force yourself into the second half of that debate. You're not as reliant, say, on people taking your points of information and stuff to put yourself in both halves of the debate. Whereas people teams in the second half are relying on the first half teams taking their POIs, and teams in the first half, more importantly, are relying on the second half teams taking their POIs. Those kind of things don't need to affect you as much in the first half. So I would go through all the practical ramifications that could happen with the policy in my first speech. I would then probably have, one other point, one other principled objection, but I would keep the guts of my principled objection to the second speech. That makes sense. Does everyone get what I mean by practical and principle in that context?
Are there many judges who would disapprove of that tactic, or judges who don't have?
No. I mean, if you make it glaringly obvious that you're trying to scare the first prop, some judges would feel bad, but you could do it. I always don't do that. And I really don't think there's a judge who actually do it. Because bear in mind, you've had 2 weeks, and in a prepared debate, yes, you want to beat the team opposite you. Obviously, you always want to beat the team opposite you. But when you're in the top half in a prepared debate, you should be able, if you put the work in, to beat the team behind you on the bench, right? And that's particularly important when you're in first op because you can get the dreaded scenario is you get into a situation where you have a nothingness first prop or a really bad first prop, and essentially you have to construct from op, right? So you have to pretend, construct a first prop that you're going to beat. If you just beat the bad first prop you got, well, that's great, but you're third, you know what I mean? You have to beat the best version of that. And so what you can do in that scenario is not only beat them, but cover enough material that you've beaten the second op team as well. So then, maybe you'll be unfortunate because first op prop said nothing and you get beaten by second prop. But the top 2 teams generally go through if you're decent speaks, and you can protect yourself a lot there. But in first op, you won't run out of things to say. You have huge amounts of material to cover. But again, I'd be asking myself what needs to be true to win, right? Because the temptation that I think a lot of people do, particularly in first op when they're in a prepared debate, is they go, right, when I'm in first op, I'm going to cover everything, I'm going to prep everything, I have 9 arguments, this guy speaking after me is going to have 7, between us we're going to cover 16, and we're going to be amazing, we're going to burn all the ground, and backcast will have nothing to say. And that sounds great theory, except what happens is backcast stand up and they say, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on these 2 crucial arguments and give them the depth of analysis that they need it, and suddenly you're screwed. So don't cover all of the arguments, but do cover, like, do ask yourself what absolutely needs to be true to win this, and if you cover them, you're golden.
Can you then, like, if you've got a bad first prop, would it be fair to like take points from the other half and like try to assume their case from there?
Yeah. If you have a bad first prop, what I always do is I make it very obvious they're a bad first prop without saying they're a bad first prop. So I'll do things like, first prop told us this. We would say the counter to that is this. However, if we were to look at the best route, like the best possible scenario or the best possible version of what they're saying, or the worst outcome under their policy, or the biggest problem they're seeking to solve, I would then say this. So I'd make it quite clear. They haven't got up to the bar. Here's what the bar is. Here's me beating the bar. And I would also, absolutely, take my POIs from the second half, particularly when you're in first up, right? Because no judge is going to accuse you of freezing out first prop, so you can take 3 to 4 POIs from the back half if they're really bad, right? And that's a judgment call. If they're not really bad, I'd still only probably take 1 POI from first prop, just because there's enough direct engagement there, right? You want to be putting yourself into the back half, and you want to be kind of hopefully taking your 2 other POIs or 3 other POIs from second prop in hopes that they'll feel obliged to take you later in the debate, or at least it'll be obvious if they try to freeze you out. You sure? Okay. So back half. Well, from what I said there, it sounds like you can't ever win from the back half, right? No, you can't. What teams tend to do though in the back half is like, and it's easy to do without like being conscious of the fact you're being a bit lazy. You start preparing and you're like, deadly. Have 5 amazing arguments covered. No matter what first prop says, I'm going to have something to say. But the thing is, like, first prop might define it slightly differently to how you think it's going to go. So think about the different ways in which this motion can be interpreted. And 5 arguments. What I would do is like ask yourself, how long did it take you to come up with them? If you came up with the 5 arguments, in an afternoon, chances are, unless you think that you are 20 times smarter than first prop, that they've also got those 5 arguments. So in second prop, you want to be looking, when you're doing your preparation, but what's new, what's unusual, what sounds like they mightn't have said. So that's the first thing I'd do. I'd also try and look at like, okay, if they run these basic points and I'm running this more interesting point, how do I make it seem like this point is central to the debate, right? So that and particularly when you're doing the extension in second prop, it's why from the get-go, you do a kind of a subtle knife of first prop, right? It's obviously not a knife or whatever, and you're like, first prop gave us some great, practical reasoning, or first prop gave us some great basic analysis and these basic reasons. What myself and my partner want to bring is this gigantic thing, which we think, puts the whole debate in a new light. It might be like, things that you might be looking at is the effect of the policy on a particular minority group that's going to have like a massively disproportionate effect on them, and why that's enough to justify the policy, or why that would be the main reason for implementing a policy. Other things you might want to look at is, so if something, and this sounds really basic, but say you have a motion like this has a ban gambling or something like that, right? Quite oftentimes you'll have first prop teams cover all these reasons that are bad with gambling, and they're talk about consent and stuff in passing. But you from second prop, quite oftentimes they haven't actually fully covered the argument like consent and stuff. But if it is one of those more basic arguments, really have talked through them with your partner, because you can rob an argument from first prop, but you have to analyse it a hell of a lot deeper. So in preparation for second prop, it's a bit more work than doing the preparation for first prop. But you want to be trying to find your unique point and reasonable arguments as to why you think you could make that the most central point of the debate, or looking at the cornerstones of the debate, and that the arguments you first prop will have to rely on, and really arguing them out with your partners so that you can add to them. So you can very much win from second prop, and quite a lot of the time is that first props don't actually do their job properly. and a lot of times they will go short diagonal in correct debate. So it is very much winnable from, but you do have to put in the extra work, because a lot of times you see very good second prop teams turn up, they present beautifully eloquent arguments, but that are no more advanced than a first prop team. And then they're quite shocked that they went out, because in isolation before the debate, when they said their speeches out loud and when they talked about the ideas with their partner, they sounded like great ideas. But you do have to ask yourself, like, how likely it is that the other side have had that. And going into a debate on second prop, like, you want to have maybe, I'd say, 7, 8 arguments written out, because reasonably the most arguments that a first prop team are going to be able to cover in depth is 6 if they're outstanding, which still gives you 1 or 2 arguments remaining. The likelihood is that they'll take 4 to 5, and you still have enough for a very substantial extension. If you're walking in a second prop team with 5 arguments, chances are like they'll have those 5 arguments. So do put in the time. Even if you find yourself kind of going for like having to tie it down to particular minority groups or particular social issues and stuff like that, it is worth it. And particularly where that becomes really relevant is if you're looking at IOR debates and stuff. Having done your homework, having the additional examples, can often be what gets you over the line in an IOR debate. You know, knowing exactly, like a lot of times you have things on organisations like the EU and the UN and stuff, and in those cases it's actually the team who just knows what the organisation does that goes through. So make sure you know that in second prop. Because second prop is a great clarifying position where you can be like, well, you know, we had a lot of confusion about what the EU actually does. What the EU really does is, and that's usually enough to put yourself through, but if you're in second prop and you don't know what the EU actually does, or you know, the ICC actually does, well, you know what you should be doing to win, but you don't know it, so it's of no use to you. Anyone have any questions on that?
Yeah. Is there any preparation you can do in advance for a second prop sum speech?
There's a bit, like for both some speeches, there's a bit you can do in that, like, even in prepared debates, you can predict what 2 of the 3 issues are going to be. Like, at the very least, you can probably predict what 3 of them are. Like, I mean, this has a ban gambling, and we all know that consent is going to be a big issue, right? So if you are doing the sum, like, ask yourself what is the best representation of like why consent would exist for a gambler is. And then what is the argument I would have against that, right? It is just like, for preparation for some speeches and both is about really looking at what the other side are going to say. And there's a temptation when you think your speech is cracking, I think, with these kind of things, where people kind of go, oh, my speech is great, and I'll give 5 minutes and I'll look at what the other side are going to say. And there's a bit of kind of, like, particularly between teammates, no one wants to say to the other teammate, well, I'm not sure if that point you had went far enough to beat it. And they'll often say, well, you know, the other side will say this, but your point beats that. Like, the mace and doing the preparation and stuff is where you need to be really honest with your teammates. Like, if you think there's a flaw with your argument, like, point that out to your teammate beforehand. Don't go in there and be like, oh, I think I should have said something. Oh well. Like, it's the only way to get about it. That is really the only way you can prepare for some speeches, is to just reasonably ask yourself what the other side are going to say. In terms then of the second opposition, you can run a purely negative op. I wouldn't do it. It's risky going into a prepared debate trying to run a purely negative op. For one thing, like, quibbles about models and stuff and practical arguments would have generally all been taken by your first op team. So it's very hard for you to run a purely negative op, because they'll have probably done it in one speaker because they've had 2 weeks to prepare. So in second op, what I'd always try to do is either broaden the debate or tighten the debate to something that suits me. So, like, again, it's trying to look for the minority who are massively adversely affected by the policy, so much so that, like, even if there's a marginal benefit for the majority, you can't justify it. Or I'd be broadening it out to say, you know, to run, not as, like, don't ever call it a slippery slope argument, but, you know, an argument about, like, what this principally means in terms of concessions of rights and things like that. It's in the back half, and a lot of times you'd be looking to make your more principled rights arguments and stuff like that, which I think get a bad rep in debating. Like, people say, oh, you know, you can't really run rights arguments. Like, people sort of frown on them. I think that's because too many teams in IBs go, and you can't do this because it's against humanity. And what humanity, and say nothing else, right? In a prepared debate when you've had a bit of time to go through what the actual rights arguments are, to go through why it means so much, you can actually come up with very plausible rights arguments. And I think that's the kind of thing you'll be looking at in the second half. But again, one of the biggest things that hinders teams in the second half is everyone goes, and we're going to run that, we'll run that workers' rights point, or we'll run that, life as a facilitary right point, and don't actually talk it out with their teammates so that they haven't put the legwork in to fully develop the point. So just make sure you're doing that if you're in the second half, because rights points work really well if you sound confident, if you sound fluid, and if you join over your links. If you haven't joined your links and haven't proven everything as you go along in a rights argument, it just sounds a bit fluffy. And judges, well, if you've me, I'm quite liberal in how much credit I give these things. If you've another judge, they mightn't be as really as I am. It's rights arguments. I'm going to see a lot of rights arguments now. So yeah, that's basically positions.
Stylistically, do you use the same kind of stuff like extension as you say that as you do VP or brush?
Yeah, and if you're in the second half, it is basically the same as VP. You want to be making it abundantly clear you have an extension. Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly the same. It's just, in theory, Mace is, like the Mace competition is just a higher standard VP because we've all had time to prepare. And from a judging point of view, I love the Mace because there's never that awful IOR round that there is in every IB. And we know there's nothing about anything. I mean, people generally know stuff. I've judged IOR rounds in Mace. It's where I've learned stuff. I can't remember the last time that happened to me in an IB. It should be fine. And that is a great comfort about the Mace. If you've done your work, you're going to go through it, right? Or you're going to certainly push the team very, very close to going through. And it is just, if you've done your work, if you kind of said your arguments out loud, so obviously you can't say, write your speech for the second half and, deliver it, but you can have spoken those arguments out with your teammates. You can have written out, what do I mean by this particular point, and have said that out loud, so it's more fluid for you. But, yeah, it's the exact same. People get ideas in their minds, but it's not. It's the exact same.
If you're in the second half and you really need to know the first half, or if you're in the second half and you need to know the first half, what's the best way to go about doing that without clauses?
Depends how much you need to knife, right? So if you have I will say this as a caveat, knifing is you get to know this in debate the more you debate it, right? Some judges hate knifing and there's just no, if that judge is in the chair, you just can't knife, no matter how bad it is, you just have to, suck it up and go with it. I think those judges are few and far between, but I'm saying this as a caveat, so if you take my advice and you happen to have one of them, not my fault. If you have me in the chair, I love a good old knife, I'll sit through another half an hour of a really bad debate knife away. But yeah, I think there is a degree to how much you need to knife. So things if, for example, first prop just, this is quite common, right? It's uncommon generally that the first prop will completely squirrel and just talk about a completely different topic, right? What's quite common is that they'll either soften your prop or tie it to a particular minority, right? So if they've just tied it to a particular minority group of people, I think you can say reasonably from second prop, we completely agree with the first prop, we completely agree, and apply, we stand behind all their arguments in terms of its application to this particular group of people. What we want to look at is the wider societal effects, or what would happen if it were to apply to other people to show why it is reasonable analysis too. It's not quite a knife, it's a tension. Similarly, if they run a soft version of what you want to say, right, you can say, okay, and we totally think that we think first prop given us lots of arguments to support this particular mechanism. We, however, think that perhaps there are certain circumstances where we might have to go further than that. We might have to use a higher deterrent or something like that. And we're going to talk about them and give you the justifications for them. you know, drawing on the analysis given to us by first prop. You know, again, it's attention, probably slightly more attention than the first instance, but I think most judges will let you away with that if first prop has unreasonably narrow debate and stuff like that. My rule on knifing is this. I think before you do it, but if you're in a situation where unless you knife, the highest you're coming is third, I'd knife. Unless it is round 5 in my B and I know I just need to take a third to go through, then I probably wouldn't knife. But if I'm coming back half, unless I knife, I knife. Do it subtly, you know, because a lot of judges don't actually have a huge problem with the knifing, they just have a huge problem with you making the team feel really bad when you do it. So if you do it nicely, it tends to be better received anyway. Like I said, you could get the one judge who hates that, but it's unlikely.
Do you just mean like making a causal link as to why there's benefits to have it, or as opposed to just like
and this goes for debating generally, like what seems so intuitive to you, like actually what happens in debating a lot of the time is teams do better in arguments that are counterintuitive to them than arguments that are intuitive to them. Because when something's counterintuitive to you, you explain it, you make the argument, and because you're questioning the argument yourself the whole time. But a lot of the times you'll see, like in debates where people are, particularly if someone's on the liberal side of the motion and they all have to run conservatively, they'll say, if there's kind of an attitude of, actually, you know, aren't we all liberal? You know, like, couldn't we do that? And an acceptance that, like, we all think the same way. And we just, like, you'll get away with it some of the time, but if a good second prop team after you explains, like, why it is we're all liberal, or why it is that right matters, you will get screwed there in analysis. But more crucially, if you go to an international competition, the assumption that we are all liberal and all agree that this, you know, that gay people should be allowed to marry or adopt or whatever, like, I mean, you cannot presume these things. Like, I mean, a lot of the times, the debaters in the room, the judges in the room won't think like that. So it's a lazy habit to get into. Because I've often seen teams walk out and say, but they were arguing something crazy. And I'm like, yes, but you argued nothing. You just said, actually, don't you know, and yeah, you're one, I'm like, great. Like, that's not an argument, you know what I mean? So just remember to put those things in the causal links. The final thing I'm going to say is, in prepared debates, points of information, your weapon, right? Like, people have, like, so often people don't put any, like, put a lot of work into their speeches, but no thought into what their points of information are going to be going in, right? Particularly if you're in the back half, points of information are a way to claim ground quickly in a debate, right? Or get judges excited about your extension. Because if you have a clever point of information or a point of information the judges go, oh, what's coming up? They're waiting for you. You've created expectation. You've already put yourself into the judge's mindset. If you contrast that with either a bad point of information where the judges are like, oh crap, you know, second half's going to be pretty dull, or you say nothing and the judges are like, oh, well, you know, they're not really in it. You're just a non-entity in the debate. Points of information cannot actually do you harm, not offering them. Because people often don't put in the effort into points of information. Points of information in the second half should really claim ownership of my extension's coming in, it's going to be on something like this. Like a point of information, I'd always, 1 minute in, when the bang goes for the speaker, unless they're still like, you know, on point D of their model, I'd be up with a point of information. Just to get, like, speaker won't take you. It's just that the judge knows you're there. They know you're coming, they know you're in it, they know you sound confident. Whereas if you're not there, you create an impression that you're just, well, you don't really think you're in it. The second thing about points of information is, points of information you use to claim ground and you use to highlight things that are coming in your speech, or to ask really difficult questions of the first prop team, for example, if you're in second half. What you don't want to do though, is if you have a really interesting extension, like a nuanced extension that the first half, you don't think the first half are going to do, is give out the entirety of the extension on the point, right? Any good first prop team or first op team is just going to take your extension and put it in as a point, and now you have no extension. And the extra work that you did, thinking and preparing for this debate, is now mute because you've just told everyone what exactly your extension is. So you can use kind of cryptic points of information that cause people to conceive things. That's perfectly acceptable. But you know, be cautious. Be cautious of giving away too much. So it sounds contradictory, but what I mean is, if I'm in second prop, I'll often give a point of information that's on something quite obvious that I know first, if I'm in second up, I'll often give a point of information on something quite obvious that I know first speaker is going to talk about as soon as he stands up. But me saying it means that when they stand up and make that point, the judge has already kind of given me credit. The judge is already kind of thinking, oh, did they have that, or did they get it from the POI they just got? So, you know, use the claim ground that way. Don't give away your extension, but do use it to ask cryptic points that can type it up. So you can have that power moment where you're like, oh, I already conceded this. But yeah, don't give away your extension. On the flip side, right, these kind of cryptic points of information have become all the rage in debating, whatever. Totally agree with them, and when they're well used, they're good. People ask tangential points of information that have no relevance to their case all the time now. Don't do that, you've just wasted a point of information, right? Like, people do it all the time, and they think, like, and what we're going to do now is the speakers are going to get this, they're going to be confused, and they're going to talk about it for 90 seconds. Any speaker who's like, in any way decent, won't talk about it for 90 seconds, and the judge will be just like, what was that point about? So don't give one that's in no way related to your case. The second thing, though, is teams do this all the time now, and I don't know why. So they're in first row. They're giving their 2 speeches, they're sat down. Second off, they're taking them on the point of information. Now, there's every chance, you know, they're in the top half, there's every chance that they can be crowded out of the debate. And they stand up and they offer a really cryptic, you know, point of information like, why do birds fly? And they sit down and they're really proud of themselves and they look through the team and they're like, ah, I proved that point. And I sat there as a judge going, I have no idea what that point is. Like, because if you're offering a cryptic point of information and you're not speaking after that cryptic point of information to explain it, you've just confused the room. Like, you've done nothing else. Maybe there'll be some judge on your wavelength who's like, I kind of get that. But even then, the judge can't credit that because it's conjecture in an adjudication. The judge is like, well, I think what you're wondering what they meant by that was, you know, and the other judge will be like, no, I get that. Sorry. So, you know, don't give a cryptic point of information when you've already spoken. It's pointless. So, any questions on that?
So should you say something like, as I said in my speech,
yeah,
blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, you want to, and oftentimes what I find is, this is getting quite comedy now, but oftentimes you'll find that top half teams use POIs really badly. Well, which I mean, so first prop may have presented their case, right, and they've won maybe 2 arguments from theirs are standing, right, and second prop come along, they say, well, you know, what this debate is really about is X, right. Oftentimes then you'll see first props giving POIs to second ops, relying on second props material, like, which basically translates as, just in case you weren't clear, judge, second prop are beating me, their material is more relevant, and I'm going to use it to give the POI. You need to tie it back to something that is definitely in your case, that's something that's definitely completely yours, not something that second prop has said. And it's similarly, like, it's just a tactical thing. Oftentimes you'll see as well, in a kind of different version of that, is you'll see second prop or second op team standing up and giving a rebuttal that relies on the information given by first prop or by first op, right? In which case you've just used your rebuttal to tell me why the other team was winning. Try and come up with a new reason as to why that rebuttal doesn't stand, as opposed to just defending the former team's case. But yeah, it should be something specifically to your case. There's lots of theories on points of information. The only other thing I'll say about them, though, is make sure you get seen on points of information, right? Particularly when you get to the latter rounds of these competitions, and they're in big chambers and stuff like that. Oftentimes people won't notice that you're the one standing up. Particularly, like, I mean, if you happen to be unfortunate enough that you have 2 6'2" guys on the team or something like that, you want to make sure you're noticed. I often do this if I find someone's not listening to me or not noticing to me, just to make sure that the judges, even if they're not really paying attention, see that I'm standing up a lot. You know, if you find that, say sir, madam, whatever. And don't stay standing up like an idiot for over a minute, right? I do this all the time when I'm speaking at someone and they're annoying me, jumping up and down in the jack in the box. I just leave them standing there. I leave them standing there. I think I've left someone standing there for nearly 3 minutes once, right? All it means is that they're not writing anything and they're stopping annoying me because it's way more distracting when they're going up and down than if they're just standing there. So if a speaker hasn't taken you and it's been over a minute, don't be thinking, any second now. Like, sit down, have your partner stand up. Like, don't be a mug about it. In terms of points of information and tactics and stuff in general, it's too long to go through all of these tonight, but there is a workshop online by a guy called Stephen Boyle, it's on idea, and it's on, I think it's called like 21 dirty tricks, or 21 dirty tactics, and it goes through like all the different tactics that are not against the rules, but pretty bad things to do with debates. So like depending on how like screwed you are, or like what your moral standard is, read it and use it, or watch it and use it. It's like, I think it's only about like half an hour long, like 20 minutes long. But it's really good. It goes through kind of all these kind of devious things you can do. Any other questions?
Do you think it makes sense, like, for both teammates to offer POL at the same time, or do they only ever do one of these stuff?
If everyone's up, I tend to stand up just for visual impact. But, but you don't. If the other two guys are up, you don't have to be like sitting there and like. But apart from that, I like if I really want to get a point of information in, I bend the rules and I do every, it's 15 seconds, and so every 7.5 seconds, me or my teammate will stand up. It doesn't break the rule, but it does in spirit, and they really probably will take you. The other thing is, like, there's a bit of psychology. If you know the team opposite you, if you know they're likely to take who they envisage to be the weaker teammate, have that person be offering the point of information. I often look like I'm really confused when I'm offering a point of information, like, particularly, like, if against Oxford or something like that, because they're twats. Like, if you kind of look like you're, oh, I'm really confused, but I'm just standing up. Like, they'll take you just because they think you're going to bat you down. But yeah, like, there's no guarantee that you're going to get taken on more than one POI as a team. And that's the attitude you should go in with, right? Like, you should be, like, people should be taking 2 points of information, they should be taking one from all teams, like, that's the kind of thing that's in the spirit of debating and stuff. But your only real guarantee is that you guys as a team are going to be taking on 1 point of information. So really, really put a bit of time into what is that point of information. I always went into my mace rounds with 3 or 4 points of information written out, but labelled by how important it is. And I would literally argue with my teammate over the wording when I got to ladder rounds, just because you want to land the most punch you can. And you'll know yourself then which part of your case has been dropped, which part of your case has been responded to. Particularly when you're in first prop, it's really important. Like, first prop, the whole case goes in the first speech. Second speech is just, do you remember what my partner said? And every point of information after that just has to be, do you remember what we said and how we already won this debate, and they just go up. Like, yeah. Okay. Nothing else?
It won't happen in debates, of course. But what happens when debates go really, really wrong?
When debates go really, really wrong, only thing you can do is like go back to basics, because actually, like, really bad debates are actually like oftentimes the most difficult to judge. Particularly very good judges, because they're used to judging like quite good rooms, and then they're in this room where it's unclear who's winning and who's doing what. And in bad debates, and this goes in were to happen in the mace for IVs, and crucially for international tournaments. When you go down, when you're in certain rooms, the most important thing is to forget about going for glory, forget about the speaks you're going to get, forget about using the most convoluted language, forget about all of those things, dumb it down, go back to basics, make your points clearly, use your points of information well, and make sure to spell it out why you have beaten the other side. In those kind of debates, that is the most crucial thing, just have it like unquestionable that you bet the other side. Be more explicit, like they said, we say in response, they said, and we win the cause. Like, that's a quite, like, don't, there is a speaker on the Irish circuit who says, and we win the cause all the time, and he wrecks my head. I'm not saying say that, but that is a question you want to be continuously asking yourself, like, have I shown that I won this point? Have I shown that I won this point? Because oftentimes, like you can see, in Euros and stuff like that, really quite good teams drop below a certain level, and they go in and they just don't react to the room. They use language, they use points that are maybe too philosophical for the room, stuff like that, and don't actually just tie it in to why they are winning. And if you're in a bad room, if the debate has gone like, if you're confused as a speaker, the judges are definitely confused. Like, in that situation, judges will reward clarity. Above anything else, they'll reward clarity. If you make their job easy, you probably will get the win. Because it's oftentimes in those kind of rooms, there's lots of different points that aren't fully made by lots of different teams. There's, you know, it's unclear. The more unclear a debate is, the messier a debate is, the more random the result is. Like, judges just don't really know. So I would make my speech almost like an adjudication in that situation. First prop gives this, first op gives this. We in second prop give you this. It's important because, it's crucial to the debate because, it wins the debate because, second op say this, but we beat them because. It's almost like an adjudication, your speech, yeah. So if you have to cut out, you know, your point that you were putting in there just to show how smart you are and get the 85, you drop it, you give the extra time to just beat the other side and get through. Which sounds, yeah, it's not fun when that happens, but you just have to take your medicine and get it. Yeah.
It's not necessarily the top time to happen in Irish Mace because it's pre-prepared, but if you're on the bottom half and the first prop word, the first off before you is very weak and the opposite bench is all strong, like you're essentially like the extension speaker has to do the whole model bashing where the whole like has to bash the first team and then, you know, engage with the second team. Is there any particular way that you think is best at approaching that?
But if you're in a situation where say the first prop breakout, when you give the second prop extension to speaker, at that point functions like first prop. Go back to basics. Like if they haven't identified what the problem is, that goes in your speech. If they haven't identified the solution, the best solution, that goes in your speech. And like treat it like a first prop before you get into the material you've discussed. And again, judges will reward you for that. Similarly, if you're on second off and first off haven't done their job, like do give the 2 minutes of model bashing, then get on. I wouldn't treat it like, you can't treat it exactly like a first off speech, because obviously if you spend the entirety of an extension speech bashing the model and bashing practicalities, you aren't going to get your extension out. But yeah, we're putting a certain amount of material there. And as well, like people, in that sort of scenario, so I put in two points or 2 minutes of rebuttal and practical stuff in my extension speech. I would also not be afraid to like model bash in my, not to waste too much time, but have an odd bit of rebuttal as a model or practical stuff in my sum. Because what that does is it red flags to the judges, particularly if it is new. Why wasn't the very first question I hear, if I hear something like something resembling model bashing or practicalities in the sum speeches I ask, why wasn't that in the first op? And it makes it that can make it quite apparent that you bet them at least, and then you're on from there. The most important thing in that scenario is to make it clear that you bet the team on your bench, and then go on. Because there can be situations where it seems insurmountable to beat the you know, if the other side are functioning as a unit, and beat the team on your bench, and then you know, go after them. But don't put yourself in a scenario where you come forwards behind the bad team. Because that happens to more teams than you think, you know what I mean? But as well, judges will be very forgiving if you do the basics then in the extension speeches. Judges will be 9 times out of 10 in the marginal call will go your way. If judges believe broad clarity to it. That's again something you shouldn't say, because obviously judges are perfectly neutral and fair and everything. Not really. Like, you know, if it's day 3 of yours or whatever, or day 3 of yours, and it's 9 AM and the judge is hungover and you bring clarity to the debate, that is going to help you. Even if people don't want to admit that, like that does various things. Well, best luck for the Mace. The Mace is like the best competition. It really is. It's an excellent competition, and it gives you such confidence. And if you do your work, you will go through. In the Mace, and I'm sure the motions are going to be great this year. I know the standard of judging is going to be excellent. You know, and that's the final thing I would say is if you get a result you don't agree with, if you go out in the Mace, if anything like that happens, if you happen to get the quarterfinal from death or whatever, make sure you go to the pub afterwards, right? People skulk off in these scenarios. Like, make sure you get all of the feedback you can in that scenario. Make sure you get all the information, because like the Mace is never in an IB will you have 3 judges or 5 judges of the caliber that you will have judging you in a round in the Mace. So get all the feedback from all of them, like use it to move on, get the tip. But even, right, like particularly, and this goes across the board, if you get a decision you disagree with in any competition, that is the judge you need to talk to the most, right? 2 reasons. You create some deterrent in them that they're not going to screw you over again because you're the annoying team who just keeps asking questions, and they really want to avoid that in the pub after the round. So that they think you're just going to keep asking, but why, but why, but why? Less likely they'll do it to you again. But more importantly, like some judges are just bad judges and unfortunately have huge speaking records. Finding out what they like means that when you go in and you have them in the chair, you can adapt accordingly, get the results, get out. It's pragmatic, but it works. But that won't happen to you in the Mace. But in my IBs and stuff, I'd always do that. Because in the Mace, you will have 3 to 5 hugely talented judges and get their feedback. Also, get the free drink, but get their feedback. Sorry, Roy. So, yeah, good luck. Nice. And I'm sure you're all going to go.
Do you think it's exciting like which order you're speaking with your
teammate? In the first half, in the first part, I put the teammate who knows least about the topic first. In a prepared debate, not in an IB, but in a prepared debate I would, because you can literally just write the speech and deliver it. And I would put my second speaker, because the second speech is basically a defence of the first speech and pointing out why the first speech is still standing. And particularly first off, do a job and you think of something you didn't think of. Having a person who knows more go second in that scenario is important. Apart from that, I always think whoever goes first and first off should do the sums. Because I think second speech in first off is an extension speech. Generally how I do it is if I have someone go first in first prop, they go second and first off, and they do the extension speeches. Because I think every team has what you would call an attack dog, which is just like, someone who's like well able to do the rebuttal, helps us with a bit of humour or sarcasm or something that works for them, doesn't really matter which. And that I would put that person in the rebuttal heavy positions. So that's not something first speaker as well. But particularly like if the motion's IOR and stuff, you want to have your more knowledgeable IOR speakers speaking second first of all. Anything else?
No.